Hey everyone, thank you so much for being here this morning. As you can see, I have next to me Josh Smith, my friend. Thanks so much for doing this today, Josh. Super
Yeah.
psyched to have you here. So, a few things just off the top. I'm just trying to set up my window here. There we go. Want to thank once again Josh for being here, and all you guys once again. Josh was supposed to be here last week. We took a week off, so thanks for coming back. Off the top, we have the tip jar if you want to help out. All the money goes to me and Josh, and I put it towards the channel to do what we're doing here, and I forward it over to the artist as well. And if you want, Josh has his website, Josh Smith Guitar, and you have that new Blu-ray which you want to talk about, View at the Baked Potato, and all sorts of great stuff. So if you want to help us out directly, help out the artist directly, buy something from Josh through his website, because that's how he sees the money and makes a living. And Jeff-McErlain.com, we have the link to all the True Fire courses there. So what we're going to do right now is Josh is going to talk a little bit about guitar, as always, and give a quick lesson, and he and I are going to chat. So over to you, Josh.
All right. Well, hello everybody. Hope all's well, and thanks Jeff for having me. So last week was an epic lesson-a-thon for me. I gave 46 lessons in 6 days, and one of the nice things about it was kind of refreshing myself on some things I'd started to lax on, but then also remembering some of the real fundamental things that I used to work on a lot when I was, really building the blocks and stuff. So I get three main questions most of the time when I teach lessons. One, of course, is how do you break outside of the box? I guess that's always question number one. Number two is how do you really build a solo? Because I get a lot of questions about that, my phrasing and my solo. So the third question goes along with that. And it's always about time and pocket and swing. And I realized a thing that I did a lot and worked on that I think could help some people or all people or whatever is when building my phrasing for soloing, I realized how much of it came from the way that I practiced rhythm guitar. And there were some things that I was doing that I didn't even realize necessarily were exercises. But when I started to show them to people last week, they all thought, oh, this is really cool. And I never thought about doing that. So I thought maybe I'd talk about some of those things today. So I'm always trying to, for lack of a better words, tie together my internal clock in my hands. So I've got like this beat and this time inside me, and sometimes my hands can't physically pull off all the subdivisions and things that I'm hearing. So I realized when I was young, those kind of things were happening. So I started to come up with like ways to break it down. So I would come up with a vamp, and I would set a groove. So maybe I'd just start with like a straight eighth notes groove, and I'd find something like. So I'd establish that groove and, set a pattern. It could be any chord, it could be anything. And then I would start to subdivide it every bar to kind of help with my internal clock. And I'd change it every bar. I'd change what I was doing. I'd go over the bar line. So you get stuff like this. And like I would just sit there and do that for quite a while, and I realized it was really starting to help my time when I was soloing, when I was starting to develop lines to fit over these grooves, that all of a sudden I was much more fluid in breaking up the time, and crossing bar lines and starting to develop longer lines. So then I started to do this kind of stuff with all of my favorite patterns. So I'd take a shuffle. I'd take a more of a shuffly funk groove or a Motown groove or a straight blues shuffle, and I would start to do these same type of rhythmic exercises where I would then start to put in fills in between my rhythm playing, and I realized all of a sudden my pocket was getting better and my soloing feel was getting better. And these are things you could do a lot if you have any questions, I can get into them, or I can just start showing you some of the other grooves that I used to work on, these type of things. If that makes sense.
That's fine. Do you want to wait for some questions, or you want to?
Sure.
Yeah,
Well, I'll
do
show
your
you
thing.
like I'd sometimes take a shuffle, and I'd start off just playing the rhythm of the shuffle. With no extras or anything like that. And I would just establish that groove. And then I'd little by little start again. And then I'd even expand further. I'd start to push it. And then I go even farther. And all these little things like these, just filling in the gaps while really focusing hard on never losing the pulse, started to work their way into my soloing, where my phrasing just became much more fluid and my time just got so much better. And yeah, I mean, it's such a subjective thing, pocket and time and phrasing, but these like little tools really helped me when developing my phrasing.
Cool. Sorry, we got a little lag on the vocal today. I don't know. These things just happen, and I have no. Just like you and I were talking before, and everything was lined up in sync, and then you start streaming. These things happen, so there's not much I can do about it. So, guys, if it's bugging you, driving you crazy, just close your eyes. It's a podcast. You know, all the information is still the same. There's nothing I can do. It's up beyond my control. So, what are we gonna do? So, I got a few questions. And so when you're moving your right hand, right, when you're playing, so you're looking at that as kind of keeping the time through everything, right? So can you talk a little bit about that, you know, and how that propels everything that you're doing? Because I've noticed if you, that's always kind of moving when you're playing.
Yeah, well, especially like on a shuffle like that. Sometimes I'll even just sit here and play no notes, you know, until I can make that feel good. Because, I mean, let's face it, that's the goal, is to make this stuff feel as good as possible. So if you can make that feel good, the rest is it's not that hard. So, yeah, I'm trying to keep that going. So, but it may be a different groove. Like maybe I'll play a James Brown song. Yeah, but I'm never going to lose that. So even when I start to bust out, that I can, you know, start subdividing, changing the licks, whatever, and that motion, that propulsion never ceases. 'Cause, I mean, that's your job in the rhythm section, especially on a groove like that, is to not let things drop. You know, you're building a foundation. So yeah, doing those kind of grooves like that required me to come up with a pattern, something that was static, and then expand around it. Really kind of helped me, you know, I don't know, find my voice as an improviser with time, you know.
Are there any players or that you think really helped you develop that specifically, or even tunes like when you were younger? Like, man, this is a real instrumental, or no pun intended, a real influential piece for me.
Oh yeah, like, well, a song like that, you know, listening to Catfish Collins or any of the guys with James Brown, I mean, listening to Robin play on a shuffle, some of those things I played in that shuffle were straight off the Robin Ford
Hmm.
playbook, on things I heard him play when he was comping. Um, really listening to Steve Cropper and Cornell
Right.
Dupree play soul and R&B music, that was huge for me. Like, and Motown guys too. Like listening to somebody play a groove like, a Motown shuffle that would be, or a Curtis Mayfieldy type. And so that can feel so good that it almost doesn't matter what I play, but also I can start moving in. And I can start to lay back licks like. So that was straight out of Curtis Mayfield's book and Motown book. But like listening to Steve Cropper on Sam and Dave stuff, like Soothe Me, that was huge for me. And then Cornell Dupree, of course, with King Curtis, with Aretha, and of course, in Georgia, Brooke Benton. That was really, really important to me, his playing
Oh,
on that
cool.
song. It was all these guys were developing a new thing on the fly, a mixture of rhythm and lead at the same time with all those double stops and feels and fills. I'm sorry. And yeah, it was like they were creating two parts in one. They were filling in the gaps while never letting the feel of the song and the groove die down. And I think I didn't realize as a kid how much that truly impacted not just my rhythm playing, but my soloing. When I started to get more comfortable soloing and changing, how I played with time, it was directly attributable to all the work I was doing on the rhythm
Yeah,
guitar.
well, that's great information. Hey, I'm going to try something here because the lag's gotten super crazy. I'm just going to call you back. All right, I'm going to do it live, and sometimes might reset the connection, okay? All right,
Yeah,
I'm
of
just going to
course.
call you back. You guys can see me. I'm going to call Josh back. I'm going to hang up on you now, and I'll call you right back, buddy. Hold on. See what happens. All right, everybody hanging on. I'm going to try to do this again. And if it doesn't work, I'm doing all I can. There we go. Let's see how that is now.
Yo.
It's maybe a little better. We'll see how it goes. All right, it is what it is, guys. All right. So yeah, that was really awesome. That certainly like guys like King Curtis and people that you mentioned, and it comes from your roots and where you listen to. It's funny growing up playing more like metal and rock. That being that kind of a guy. It took me a long time to figure that stuff out, and for me, it was like James Brown's greatest hits was the introduction to really being able to kind of understand that and really sounding terrible on many gigs. And almost getting fired, or just not fired, just like the stink eye, like, what are you doing? To realize that like it's all about keeping the time and everything else is secondary to that, and everything you want to do is just you can start adding to it, but also the idea of repetition is funky, right? Keeping that part.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you've got a job when you're in the ensemble and when you're playing rhythm guitars to, support the song, support the singer, support the other soloist, create a foundation. You're a piece of the puzzle with the bass player and the drummer, and maybe there's keys.
Yeah.
So you're creating the vibe of what's going on. And you're right. The stink eye, the fear of failure or whatever, and all that. That was a huge motivator for me. I mean, I was lucky as a kid to get to play a lot of gigs at a really, really, really young age, and I would play with guys, who I'm 13 and they're in their 40s and 50s,
Mm-hmm.
and they had no problem telling me if I was messing up
Right.
or if what I was playing wasn't feeling good. They'd let me know, and that was a great motivator for being better the next gig.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Can you talk a little bit about that? I know you've talked about your history growing up and being I don't say child prodigy. That's a horrible kind of thing to say, but being out there at a young age, playing gigs much younger than I think I had. I don't know what I was doing at 13, but it wasn't what you were doing.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was really fortunate to have that development, So I started going to these blues jams when I was 12 and 13, mostly because I had reached a frustration. I was working so hard in my playing to get better, and I was obsessed, as I still am.
Mm-hmm.
So I was working all the time and playing all the time. And when I would meet kids my age who maybe were putting in some of the time I was putting in and were into it as I was, they weren't into the music I was into. So I reached a real frustration point because I couldn't find people to play with. And I knew that was going to be crucial in the next step of development, not just playing by myself in my room.
Gotcha.
So my parents started taking me to these blues jams, and I would play with adults, and luckily, people kind of dug it, which helped me even get hooked further, because second anybody cheers for something you do, you're like, wow, this is the greatest thing ever. And then some of these adult bands started to see, hey, this kid's pretty good, and also maybe if we hire him for some gigs, we'll get some more people to come out because it's a novelty. And I didn't really care because I wanted the gigs, I wanted to play. So I started playing all the time with this one band who was asking me to come a lot. And I know for a fact that those couple of years, 13, 14, that the hundreds and hundreds of gigs I started to play on the nights, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, in between school and all that, are a giant part of why I'm who I am now. Why I was able to kind of figure out little lessons on the fly. Because, man, you just grow so much more on the job than you do in the bedroom,
There's nothing. There's nothing like playing a gig.
Yeah, and I was lucky to have so many hours of doing it. So I was able. Plus, I was automatically the main soloist in the band, so it forced me to start learning how to tell a story with a solo and come up with a vocabulary that could last 3 hours, and not keep repeating myself over and over again. And I know that's attributable to maybe the amount of stamina I have, where I'll play for 4 hours a night playing improvisations. That's what I live for, and I think it's part of it is attributable to all those gigs as a kid.
Sure. And how you like all of it, how you dealing with the fact of not gigging right now, and how's that? It's really difficult, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, since 13, this is absolutely the longest without a gig in life. It's really weird. Things feel weird. We played a gig about 10 days ago at the Big Potato for a live stream, so with no one in the house. And it was the first time we played in almost 4 months, since February. And it was just so weird. And also everybody's time was just out the window, because you're doing nothing but playing by yourself or with track, metronome or something. And you lose that living, breathing time,
Which is really fascinating. They're muscles, and you need to exercise that. Your time and playing live. It's completely different, and I think I use the analogy of what we do in practice here. You could be like a black belt in the dojo, but then you actually go to a competition, you get your ass kicked, because it's a completely different thing. It's the interaction with everybody else. So what's starting to go on now? Are things starting to open up a little bit more over California slowly, or what do you think is going to happen with gigs? That's the big question.
Well, I think the rest of this year is pretty much kaput.
Yeah, me too.
But I don't know 100%. I still have a tour in the UK in October, and we'll see. It's not technically canceled yet. I'm hoping that it's real, but I know the UK numbers are going up at the moment too.
I know.
And who knows? But yeah, things are opening up here. The Baked Potato is now going to make it where 32 people can get inside.
Okay.
The Baked Potato is very, very small, so that's all they can allow at the whatever 25% capacity rate or something. But we'll see, man. I mean, some people are kind of hesitant to even go play in front of people from our side. Even as much as we want to play, it's like, well, we don't want to get sick. So I don't know. I mean, I would love to be out there playing because I miss it a lot.
Yeah.
But I got to take the advice of expert.
Well, look, I try to keep all this off of the show, but I know people who've had it, and it is no joke. Family members of mine who had it, and it's, seriously worried and still recovering, a month and a half later. You know what I mean? So it's no joke. But anyway, well, let's go to guitar, because we try to not talk about some of that stuff. One thing I love about your playing, was many things, but I'm always your level of technique, and I mean, I don't think you just play from technique, but you have this level of this just absolute great virtuosity. And what can you talk about how you practice every day? And I know you practice a lot. We talked about that. We hung out in Italy. We did a gig there. And we discussed that. And I always find it fascinating what your philosophy is in that, and what you do every day, and how you try to maintain that, and how do you keep it together?
Well, I mean, I think obviously the most important thing for any of that is just playing every day. So I don't always practice, with intent every day. But I do play with some intent every day, whereas it's not just noodling. I'll sit down and play I'll play a song. I almost never just noodle. Everything I do is in time of some sort. I'm tapping my foot. I'm hearing changes of some sort go by. Maybe it's just a vamp, but I'm always hearing something and playing as if I'm playing in time. That helps. But I think, just playing in general some every day is the main key to keeping the mental side sharp and the physical side sharp. So I'm always trying to tie together, like I was saying earlier with my clock, I'm always trying to tie together my clock in my hands, my brain in my hands. So I work on like just little things that help me do that and stay sharp, because I feel like people don't always pay close attention to the narrative they've got going in their brain when they want to improvise.
Yeah.
They've got an agenda a lot of times. So like, I want to play these licks, and I know this scale works with. And if you sometimes shut that off and really focus on what is the first idea you really just had, if you can start to connect that first idea immediately to your fingers, things start to come so much faster. And I'm that's a lot of things that I practice, are trying to eliminate all the extraneous and get those things to happen, those connections to happen quicker. So I'll do things a lot of times like trade with myself. That helps me a lot. I'll sing.
Can you give us an example, like a physical? Just play for us and show us what you're talking about, so people are clear. I know what you're saying, but it's great to see a physical one if you can.
Well, I like sing and play, so I'll always sing stuff that I would never play. So I might go whatever. Make the time. It's going to end up having different time than the way that I would just play. So I'll sit there and go there. And I'll keep going back and forth until I kind of start to stumble onto some new stuff. But it's more about sharpening the connection between my brain and my fingers, I think, and getting ideas out faster.
I talk to students about that all the time, of like practicing with some sort of, I never noodle either, right? I tell everybody, don't ever noodle, because it's just a waste of time. I'm always thinking about some sort of changes or rhythmic feel going on. Because I think other than that, it doesn't make any, it's just nonsense. It's like you just blurted out any idea and not even made a complete thought. So I can't even imagine at this point playing anything without thinking about what sort of rhythmic feel is going on, or what the tempo is, or what the changes are. So what's cool, what I noticed, and I think this is what I'm hearing from this, is when you sing something, I know when I sing something that might be different than my guitar phrasing, because as guitar players, a lot of times we just fall into this guitar player stuff, and because we would never play the fast shit that you sing. If you keep playing guitar, you would never sing that. You know what I mean? So I think that's a really useful thing to think about. And when you say sing, and this is for you, like you sing in your band and you've got a good voice. My voice is just, is passable. I never really worked on it. So I just want to be clear, when I tell people sing what you want to play, I don't mean like go out in a gig and sing it. Just even if it's out of tune, it's the rhythmic idea. It's what you're kind of hearing, and it's play off of that, right?
Well, yeah, it's the rhythmic ideas. And like you said, I sing stuff I would never play, especially rhythmically. So like, I know there's a lick I play a lot in time that directly came from like one of these sessions. And it's like if I'm swinging, where I start to change it up and go straight. Which directly came from me going, and then I kind of found that, and it became something that I do in my playing much more comfortably. But I know it came from something I did while I was singing and doing these type of things.
Now, what I think is fascinating about this, and I really love this, is because then it's your own thing too. It's not, you're not copying something from somebody else, which is always cool to do. We've all stolen. That's part of the job of learning other people's stuff. But what I like about this is it's really you. It's coming from, that, get into the little kind of metaphysical stuff, like the thought behind the thought. Like it just came out, and that's really what part of you. So these kind of licks and these phrasing become truly original.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's, as an improviser, the goal, number one, tell my story, do it my way, find my voice. And like I was saying earlier, I think we're too quick to just ignore the initial thought. Like when any music comes on, when I'm in the car and Lady Gaga comes on or whatever comes on, I immediately start hearing, it could be bum, 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 ba-dum, and I'm hearing ba-da-ba, da-da, ba-da-da-da, ba-da. I'm hearing something. So I'm trying to register those things quicker and realize, these are actual ideas I'm hearing. Get them out, figure out what it is. I think we're too quick to just throw that away and go into our patterns and our normal stuff,
And a part of it is just taking the time. And I talk about this a lot, in the lessons and things that I do. And just taking the time and putting in the hours. And don't be afraid to just work out that line, because the more you do it, the better you become at it, like anything. So, and the better that you can start to self-regulate or not even edit, is not edit. When you're playing, if you work on this stuff at home and you got that line in your head, about live, it's going to start to come out because you develop a mode of thinking and a way of playing that really changes everything. And as you just said, it pulls you away from licks. Now, we all have licks, and that's cool. I think licks, people say they don't have licks. I think that's disingenuous. It's the idea of just not vomiting them out, and just playing the same shit over and over again. But when you develop this idea of listening and becoming in the moment of what you're playing, and as I had a lockdown, you guys want to check out, I kind of went on this little bit of a metaphysical thing, but this is the same thing to me, is that you're talking about developing this muscle of where you can improvise at the moment and truly come out what's coming out in your head,
Yeah, it's not 100% about how much vocabulary you have. While as much vocabulary as you have, all the better, but it's not 100% about that. It's about being able to balance all that vocabulary, but that's not the only thing going on in here. It's like I've got outside influences determining what comes out. It may be what's going on in the audience. It may be what the rest of the band is playing at the time. It may be the way that I'm feeling in the moment or my attitude. Because all these it's my influences screaming at me, play me, do this. I think that I'm like counterbalancing against like what I'm really feeling in here, and then against what can I physically even do with my hands? What have I put the time in to be able to actually pull off? And all that rolled together comes out into the story that comes to the forefront. And then I'm trying to, after the fact, or on the fly really, self-edit that and make it as direct as I possibly can. Like prune the hedges, for lack of a better,
I like
words.
that.
Just make it as direct as possible so it seems honest. Because I think we all know the difference between when we watch a guy and either he's going through the motions, or on the other side of that, he's playing like, with an ego, like to impress people, or playing everything he knows in the moment, or, and then a guy who just is in the moment completely, and you could tell he's not thinking about anything. He's just playing and it's coming out. We know when that's happening. We all feel it and see it.
Yeah. And to me, that's the goal. And I think there's a lot of that ego that we have. I don't mean ego in the sense of, I want to be great. The ego in a traditional sense of you're becoming so self-aware, and at that point in time, then I think then that's when the music goes away. Exactly. When you hear that someone who's really connecting with the music and the audience and the band and the moment and creating a live moment, that's when it really shines. But I think the thing that I like to talk about a lot is that you have to practice that too, though. It's not just something that just happens. And all the great players we love are people who practiced a lot and worked on those sorts of things. There's no question. I know you practice. You're talking about what you practice to get you to that point.
Yeah, because I started to realize little moments of whatever disingenuousness in my playing. The moments when I'd play something and know that I played it just to impress that side of the room that's full of guitar players, or I played this because it was weird and not necessarily because I truly heard it right there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the way I really that's the essence right there. I'm trying to play really, really what I hear and feel at all times without filter. And that doesn't mean completely simplifying it down and less is more, although that's a good place to start.
Mm-hmm.
But it does mean as direct as possible. So whatever the idea is, let me just say that idea and not beat around the bush,
Right. Yeah. This is great. I think I don't think I try to get people to talk about this kind of stuff on this show because I think everybody thinks we just pick up the guitar and you just do your thing and like, man, he was just great off the bat, and you're like, no, I work really hard at it, and you're a really intelligent musician, and because I like when I talk to Joey Landreth and Matt and other people I've had on the show, we've all had these same kind of conversations of like, it's this a way of practicing. I have to work through this as opposed to, I don't think, too much coffee maybe. Nobody teaches how to practice, right? Like there's the important things that you really do need, apart from, yes, you want to practice your scales. Yes, you want to work in your technique, but how to practice being a musician, how to practice being creative, how to practice getting out of your own way.
Getting out of your own way is not an easy thing to do.
No.
It's really important. And yeah, people don't work on, what do I need to do to be a professional? What do I need to do to, we all kind of get this level of contentment, and we all have our own level where we're content with what we're learning and happy. Mm-hmm. So I keep pushing mine further away so that I'm never content. So I'm working on stuff and trying to get better. But that being said, I would never say to somebody, if you're happy in where you're at, maybe you're a weekend warrior. There's nothing wrong with being a weekend warrior. Playing music is the greatest thing in the world, no matter what.
Yeah.
So let's say you are a weekend warrior and you're totally happy with where you're at. I would never in a million years presume to tell somebody, you need to be learning more, you don't know enough, you're not putting in the time, blah, blah, blah. What I would say is, are you hearing things that you can't pull off? Are there things that you wish you were doing? Not wish, but things that in your head are in there and that you're not being able to say. Well, if that's the case, then you got a problem. You're holding yourself back, and those things you got to fix. You got to take care of that. So we all got to kind of balance against what's important to us. Where are we trying to get? And so I know where I'm trying to get. So I'm going to work hard on getting that. But you got to like come to that realization. Where are you trying to go?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, in terms of, do you jam with tracks, or what do you do to kind of keep the ideas flowing, or do you use a looper? I'm just talking about technical things. People always ask, like, well, what do you practice and how do you practice it? And I think these things are helpful.
I never play with tracks. I've actually never played with a metronome in my entire life.
Really? Wow.
Never once.
Couldn't tell.
I don't know why that. I'm not saying, you shouldn't play with a metronome. I wouldn't say that.
No.
But I never did. I played when I was a kid. It was all about playing along with records. Mm-hmm. I played along with records all night long. I'd practice my practicey shit, and then I put my headphones on, and I'd have it real quiet so I could still hear my unplugged guitar. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'd have one ear off, and I would just play along with records until I went to bed, basically. So I'd get home from school, do my homework, eat dinner, practice, and then I'd play along with my favorite songs and learn stuff. So for me, that was mostly as a kid. That was the main thing, playing along with records. Now, I tend to find the most new stuff, find the most growth by practicing the way I've been just showing you now. Completely in my own time, along with just by myself. One thing I do a lot that I don't know if other people do, but it helps me, is I write changes out on a blank piece of paper, mm-hmm. and I just stare at them for a minute, and then I play over them with no accompaniment, no loop, no backing, no nothing. I just look at the paper and play. And if I get caught up, maybe I wrote some obtuse, weird chord changes that make no sense, I'll stop and I'll rephrase it. I'll play the chords again and I go, how can I make a connection here? How can I do this? And that helps me a lot. Like just you could do the same thing with the real book or any chart. Just staring at the paper and kind of fumbling my way through. That's mostly how I practice now, either by staring at changes or just playing grooves like I said, always just playing in time, setting a groove in my head. So if I set that same funk groove if I'm hearing a groove like that, I'm immediately going, I've got that internal thing that starts happening immediately. The second I hear a groove or something gets set, I'm hearing what I want to play over that. So then I'll start practicing that way. I'll set a groove and then I'll just play until I get inspired and start to find some things, or even just sharpening my tools. It's all equally as important.
Now, do you ever really just sit down and practice scales? Just working on your technique, or do you work on ideas? Excuse me, my voice is. So, in other words, do you practice scales? At some point, you probably did.
Yeah.
But do you practice scales now and things like that, or you just really work on ideas more so?
I practice scales once every 3 months, probably.
Yeah. Right.
And by practice scales, I mean very simply, I'll run the major scales, I'll run the modes, I'll run chord scales. Chord scales is the most important thing I think for when people ask me how to like unlock the fretboard and be comfortable. It's like the thing that made me most comfortable on the fretboard was just knowing pentatonic scale and every key up and down the fretboard, because I mean that's where I live. Yeah. And then knowing the major scale in chords in every key from every one of your chord shapes. Take your chord shape and run it up and down, and just play 1 major, 2 minor, 3 minor, 4 major, 5 dominant, 6 minor, 7 diminished. You know what I mean? And do that in every key. When I did that as a kid and spent time on that I think is what unlocked the fretboard for me and made me comfortable. So once I started to get out of my little box here and be playing in third position, B.B. King, knowing that, if I needed the 6, it was still right here. I didn't have to get back to here, or I could go here, or I could go anywhere with any of my chord shapes and inversions, and that unlocked the fretboard. So I'll brush those up, every 3, maybe every 6 months, really. Mm-hmm. But it's because also I'm playing every day, all the time.
I know a lot of people ask these sort of questions. I'm like you. Sometimes I'll run through them just to kind of brush up on it. Or if you're just, those points in time, sometimes you're like, wow, just my hands aren't working as well today. So then I'll just go back and work on some scales. Because there are those days where you're playing, you're like, what is going on? Like, and then I just work on ideas or just work on improvising as well. I mean, I like working on the scales. If I wanted to work on something specific, like I just want to get the picking or something like that. But yeah, I think once you've done the scales most of your life, you got to kind of stay on. I don't stay on them as much. I know classical musicians are really heavy duty on all that, but for me, but they're not improvising in the same way as we are. So I'll just use the same ideas, work out a lick or an idea, and then just try to execute it the way I want. And if there's an issue, try to figure out what the problem is, why I can't pull it off to the level I want to.
Yeah. I mean, it's it's foundational.
Yeah,
stuff.
exactly.
You have to sometimes shore up the foundation, to keep it stable. And then the rest of the time, if I'm learning or practicing, it's always like with an ear or an eye towards applying it. So I'm trying as quickly as I can to get any new idea into application form.
Right.
And I try to not even just learn, but listen to music in that way too, like to take stock in, okay, something got my interest in this. It could be harmonically what's going on, that piqued my ear. Could be the technique the guy's playing, could be his sound or his tone or whatever. But I try to take stock in what is it that got me interested in this? What perked my attention? Let me learn it for that reason. And then it really becomes something that I'm going to take into my box and make my own, as opposed to just learning a lick or an idea or a scale. Let me like learn why I wanted to learn it. What was the thing that piqued my interest?
Yeah, which is exactly. Sorry, I've got distracted. I'm looking at our questions now. So let's go to everybody's questions coming in.
Let's hear
on top of that, I just want to say once again, check out Josh. He's got the new Blu-ray Live at the Baked Potato. I've seen clips of it, and it obviously is as amazing as you thought it would be. And of course, follow you on Instagram and all. And you have a YouTube channel? Do you have a?
I've been slacking. I do have one. I haven't posted anything new in a long time. But I've used the time here at the studio to build the little camera rig. Now I've got cameras all over the studio, so I will eventually start streaming from here.
Cool.
And doing more video stuff because I'm finally set up for it.
Which is great. Excellent. And so, for me, Jeff-McErlain.com. We've got the True Fire courses there. And thank you for everybody who's been hitting the tip jar. We really appreciate that as well. So I'm going to go over to Josh here, and I'm going to read off some questions. So have the questions coming in, guys. Just give me a second. I got to go. Phil, thank you so much, as always, for posting the questions here. Phil Mingan. All right. All right, this is from 2421EI. Thanks for singing the lines. How do you work out the chords and rhythm to go with that?
Well, normally I set the rhythm in advance. So let's say it's that vamp, that same vamp. So I've got that going in my head. So I'm automatically going to start hearing stuff like bum ba bum 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 ba da. So I'm again, that's all about kind of really hearing what you're hearing right away. So I'll hear that riff and then I'll answer it. So it'll bum ba bum 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 ba bum ba da 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 da. And I'll just kind of keep going back and forth. So yeah, I'll establish what are the changes, what's the groove first, and then I'll start to sing along and start doing that exercise.
Cool. Thanks. Okay, now Roman Legion wants to know, are there skills that can only be developed on stage?
I don't know about only, but there's certainly, maybe it's not necessarily skills, but it's lessons I only learn on stage. Absolutely. Like, so I had no idea that my guitar's intonation sucked. When I started gigging, I had no idea that my gear was not up to snuff. I'd never changed tubes. I didn't have a distortion pedal. I had a practice amp with distortion. So when I got a Fender amp for the first time and went to the gig with no pedals, I didn't realize that meant all of a sudden I don't have any distortion or sustain. So I played those first couple gigs, totally clean. The reverb didn't even work. I didn't really know what that was yet. And, so yeah, these are things you only can learn on the bandstand. Like, Is your gear up enough? Is your guitar intonation well? Are you a professional? Were you on time? All these type of little things. How do you deal with other musicians? Can you get along with everybody? Mm-hmm. Those things can only be learned on time. And then the biggest one is, the playing, the whole thing about the metronome earlier. I'm not trying to say there's something wrong with the metronome. I was trying to arrive at like this living, breathing time. So I don't know how good my time is on a metronome. I would bet it's probably pretty good, but I know it's good on the bandstand. And that comes from, having guys look at me funny when they call a Motown song and maybe my right hand was not right on the... So I worked on that until my right hand was like the snare drum, and I was able to push and pull and do these things. Those things, you can't learn that anywhere but on the bandstand.
I agree. And it's interesting. Robin has talked about he never played with a metronome. It's only just been playing with records. And like you were saying, didn't really even work out licks, just played along with stuff and just kind of got the vibe and the feel and played and then gigged. So it's the same thing. So it's a different feeling of time. It's the more important feeling for time, honestly, because it's the time is relative. I think like all of our classic records that we love, the time is not perfect either. It's just it lays in as opposed to now with everything to a grid. When you listen to those old records, it can be all over the place, but in a glorious way.
Yeah, not only is it all over the place, everybody has their own time.
Yeah.
So that's the magic. Is like, okay, the drummer, maybe he's dragging a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. Or maybe the bass player is trying to pull him along, so he's on top of the beat. So maybe that means I need to be dead center. You know what I mean? Whereas if the drummer is dead center, maybe I can lay back a little bit and give it some feel. And again, these are things you can only make adjustments in real life with real people. These things don't happen with the clock and on the grid. So yeah, that's where magic comes from, is everybody kind of being in their own little personal time and then making them add up into what the band is really, really doing. This living, breathing thing that ebbs and flows,
Right. Absolutely. I'm looking at here. Okay, this is from Tom Forrest. Josh, with your right hand technique, is it all picking fingers on the strings, or are you hitting your fingers on the strings at all when you strum? Okay, well, let me read that again. With your right hand technique, is it all pick on the fingers, Sorry, so is it all pick on the strings, or are you hitting your fingers on the strings when you strum? There we go. Sorry.
Okay. Well, that depends on the groove. So if you notice when I'm soloing, I play hybrid picking almost all the time. So it's a lot of the middle finger, sometimes the middle and the index, so ring finger. So that's hybrid picking is a really tricky thing to teach because it's physical, so everybody does it differently. But on the rhythm side, if I'm strumming, normally it's just the pick, but I may take that same, like, let's take that blues shuffle that I was doing earlier. A lot of times I'll play that like this. And play it with my fingers because it's a different sound I'm going for. I'll probably do something like this. I'll turn on my Leslie pedal, and I'm going for more of an organ thing. And I like that approach because it enables me to stab all the notes at the same time, the way a piano player would or an organ player would. So it's a constant going back and forth between the two things. Mostly it depends on the vibe I'm trying to impart to that groove and the part that I hear in my head, so it's going to lead me a certain way. So it's a little of both. But if it's funk or something like that, it's normally mostly pick.
Yeah. Thanks. Richard Henry wants to know, what are you playing through for this stream?
My little pedal board and my Morgan JS12. But you're hearing through the studio monitor, so the Morgan's mic'd up out in the live room. So you're hearing the big speakers behind me.
Cool. What amp do you gig out with most? The Morgan?
Yeah, mostly. I have the JS40.
So you use the 40 watt more so than the 12?
The GOAT. And that's probably been my main amp the last 10 years. So here around town, I'll either take that or I'll take the 2-Rock. Mm-hmm. And when I'm on the road, it's like in Europe, I have a JS40 and an AC40, which is like an AC30. Yeah. And that's my preferred combination, is like the super reverby style and the AC30 style together. So if I request backline, it'll always be that, a super reverb and an AC30. In America though, it's like, I'm not, or in general, most of the times I don't have my own amps. I'm flying in somewhere and just getting backline. It'd be, if I had my druthers and, I was in my own van or bus and carrying my own shit, I would take the 2 Morgans and the 2-Rock. Mm-hmm. And I would have the Morgan be my bass thing, and I would switch to the 2-Rock sometimes. For certain songs and for certain leads. I'd sometimes set the 2-Rock up more towards the drive channel, which I don't do a lot when I'm by myself and it's the only amp. So I think that would be if I could get to the 3-amp thing, that would be my preferred setup. But, maybe by the time I'm 60, I'll have somebody carrying this stuff for me.
Yeah, we have somebody else carrying it for you. That makes a big difference. All right. Somebody's saying they went to seeing you and Greg Kakak play together, and is that as much fun as it looks?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, if you know Greg, obviously he's a character. Yeah. He's such an unbelievably great guy. So you're automatically in a great mood when you're hanging out with Greg, and the sense of humor. And Greg has something in his, besides just being a great player and a great musician, which we all understand that. He has something in his playing that has always been really, really important to me, and that's this certain level of I don't give a fuck, sense of humor, and off the cuffness. You could tell he hears it, he plays it. He hears it, he plays it. And again, as I've been saying, I'm always trying to get closer to that. If I really believe it and hear it, I want it to come out, and he's got that in his playing in spades. Like, he hears it, he plays it. So it's honest. So I connect with it. When I hear him play, it's like, so in the moment. Yeah. Besides just how great he is and his virtuosity and all that. And yeah, he's just funny to be around. So yeah, we like playing together. It's a good time.
Well, the sense of humor comes out in his playing, and I think that's really cool. You never know what's coming up next, and he's also really obviously super serious musician. And that's the coolest thing, the mixture of those two. Not taking himself too seriously at all, but being able to you know, play some amazing stuff as well.
Well, that was the thing. One of the things about Danny Gatton that
Yeah.
floored me when I dove into him was, okay, here was someone who maybe was peerless when it came to knowledge and technical ability. You know, certainly up there with most accomplished guitar players in the history of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, you know, he'd play a song and I Love Lucy would come out in the middle of a ballad, you know,
Yeah.
a Simpsons theme or whatever, the altered scale in a place where you shouldn't play the altered scale or whatever. He had no boundaries, but he was being honest. And, you know, I mean, that's such a weird thing to say, but that's really important to me. Like, I can tell when somebody's being honest in their playing and their improvisation versus, again, like stoking egos or playing to the crowd or just going through the motions. Those are the two other sides of that equation.
Absolutely.
I'm trying to, you know.
This is from S.C. Nesbitt. What are a few of your favorite dominant voicings? So, sort of technical question. Like, what are your favorite dominant voicings, if you have a few that you just throw out?
Favorite dominant voicings. Well, my favorite voicing in general is this. For the one chord, I'm always playing the 6. So my favorite dominant voicing would probably be that for the 4 chord because I can move it around so easily, and I can transition like from an A13 to A flat 13 to D7 with little motion. So those are some of my favorite ones. Like 13, that 13 with my thumb over the top is my favorite probably because I can make it a straight 7. I can go up to this and do these things. I can add the 7 there if I want. I can go straight from 7 to 13 to flat 13 to 4 and things like that. So those are some of my favorites. Also, this one is one of my favorites because I can do that.
You can do that. Yeah, I love that.
You know, besides the normal stuff, you know. But yeah, those are my favorites.
Do you cover these on your True Fire course?
Some of them, yeah. I think we're going to end up doing like I haven't done like an all rhythm guitar course. I think that maybe the next thing. I don't know.
Yeah. Highly recommend the True Fire stuff that you did. It's really great stuff, man.
Thanks, man.
Okay, this is from Twanto. I often come up with a melody or riff without any chord progression in mind. How should I be melding that with chords before I develop it? Or should I be melding that with chords before I develop it? And do you have any tips on that?
Yeah, you definitely should be melding it with chords because how do you know where you're going to go next? Unless you've started to tie it, because it could be, you may not be singing the 1, you may be singing the 3, you may be singing a harmony, So yeah, you've got to figure out where it kind of lays. At least find a key, and then let that lead you most of the way. There's a reason for this whole major scale thing and diatonic, scale and circle of fifths. It's to help kind of lay out those building blocks for you so you can start connecting those melodies as you write them. So yeah, I would take stock for a second. Okay, sing that melody, find at least what key you're in, and then start to build forward like that. Find your center, because yeah, you want to know where you can take it. You won't know where you can take it until you know where you started.
Good point. This is from Brent Tom. Can you tell Josh, I remember going to see him as a younger man in Florida with my classmate Jeff Anthony, who was playing with him. You can see, yeah, it's okay. There you go. Somebody back in Florida.
I hadn't seen Jeff. Went with me to Germany last year, and we hadn't played together since I was 16 and Jeff was 19. He was in University of Miami, and I was still in high school. And he went on tour with me in the summer break for us between school years. And we played together for about a year. And then he moved back to New York, where he's from. And we haven't seen each other for 20-something years until last year. And I reached out to him, and he ended up going with me to Germany last year on a tour. But yeah,
cool.
Small world.
Sebastian Negro is asking, at the moment of practicing altered or diminished scales, do you have any recommendations to be more fluid between the changes?
Yeah, so the diminished and altered thing, I think it helps me if I don't think about them as scales.
Right.
To me, they're not really scales. They're 4 notes. You know what I mean? It's especially the diminished. So I'm trying to use, anytime you hear me play the diminished, it's either two things. It's a bridge for me to connect two chords together, or it's a sound that I'm trying to impart over a dominant chord or something, the way that Django Reinhardt or somebody would do. So the diminished thing, the thing that helped me tremendously in developing the diminished scale was going back to what we were talking about earlier, playing the major scale in chords and then putting the diminished between every chord, and then doing it over random songs. I'd pick my random songs, and maybe I'd play 1, 6, and I'd go, 1, and then E flat diminished to E flat, and then B diminished to C, and then D flat diminished to D, and then G diminished, and back to G. And I'd start to hear it in between all those gaps, so that when I soloed, it just came out. Now, that's the other thing about diminished. We all fall into little patterns that are our thing with diminished, because again, it's 4 notes. So we all kind of find these repetitious things. So I started finding, okay, I'm using this shape a lot, obviously. So I started to see this shape in my sleep, so that's me playing it the way Django or somebody would over the 1, over a dominant chord. Right? If I'm moving between chords, then you're going to get something different. You may end up with, like if I go from 2/5, I may play things like that to connect the dots. So, yes, is it important to go? Yeah, sure, it's important. But only in a sense that it helps you kind of, I'm always looking for a connection to where I'm going next. So once I felt comfortable in the pentatonic scale everywhere and in finding my chord voicings everywhere, then I could go to diminished in any one of my little tricky diminished things that I played wherever I was. So if I'm saying we're in A and I'm up here playing B.B. King and I'm going to the 4, so knowing I can go right and play that D flat. Or if I'm here, knowing that I can play this B flat, by moving that a minor third. Or if I'm here playing blues and I want to go to the 4, knowing I've got this one. So that comes from comfort on the fretboard and kind of just hearing. It's really more about hearing that sound, because it doesn't matter where you are, it's everywhere, that diminished shape. It's just a couple of notes. So I think if you practice songs or just random changes and start putting that diminished chord in between each change, you'll really start to feel it and hear it, and it'll just start coming out.
Yeah, it's a great way. I look at it the same way as well. You practice it, but I hear it as a sound. I don't hear it so much as a scale where you're just going to borrow. I hear it as a sound. Like for me, like when I use diminished, same stuff that you're talking about, superimposing it maybe where places where you're not actually playing the chord. But also when I go for altered or diminished things, I'll practice a scale, of course, and you want to work on it. But for me, I just hear it as, I just see it as alterations on the dominant chord or as a passing chord.
For me, it's a bridge.
Yeah.
I've got my bridges that I use to connect chords together. And diminished is probably the main one.
Yeah.
But, it's one of the things. I'll chromatically connect some dots. I'll use a diminished or an augmented chord, and I'll use 2/5-1s. And that's how I'm making connections between chords. So it's just one of those ways.
Yep.
So, but it's being comfortable in knowing, okay, let's say I'm going from the 1 to the 6, right? Well, that means I've got E flat, but also being comfortable to know that I've got C diminished, I've got E flat diminished, I've got F sharp diminished. So wherever I'm soloing, if I'm going from here to here, I can play, wherever I am, whatever diminished arpeggio or scale or shape you've learned, that I can, it's more about knowing what the connection is and being comfortable in the neck. That way it just comes out. Yes. So it's a bridge for me.
This is great. Thanks, man. That's an excellent answer and really clear cut. Here, practice this. It's just always nice to have something like that.
Just take your favorite song. It could be Knocking on Heaven's Door and just put a diminished chord between every chord in those changes until you hear it so clear. and then solo like that. Then do it soloing, you know.
Yeah, great, excellent. This is from For the Love of Vintage. What are Josh Smith's dreams / music goals today?
Well, I'm fortunate to even play guitar for a living
Sure.
most of the time. So some of my dreams have come true, you know, and I got a good life and a great family, and I'm lucky. I've done nothing but play guitar for 30 years, you know, and I've got a studio and I'm working. You know, is it rough and hard and difficult and all those things? Yeah, it's really difficult and up and down and you know, so do I have goals? Sure. The biggest one has never changed. That's to be playing my music full time, to have a band that's really my band, to be out there doing this on the scale that I wish I could one day achieve. Because I know people would like to hear me play, and I still can't get there to some of these places where I want to be. And when I do get there, I'm not yet presenting myself in the way that I really wish I could be, with the guys I want to play with, playing the way that I want to play. A lot of times all my effort gets put into actually making a gig happen, as opposed to making a gig be as great as it can be, or the way that I want it to be. So that would be a nice shift to make it where the sole focus is, okay, now I can get everywhere. People really want me, and the money's there, and I can get there. Now let me focus on making it the best it could possibly be, and the things that I've dreamed of doing my whole life. Right. So I mean, that's one of my biggest goals. And the other is you know, a new one really from the last 5 years, and that's keep producing records for others. I didn't think I'd really love it, and I was wrong. I love producing for other artists, and now I'm doing it a lot. And so I'd like to continue getting better at that and doing that as much as possible.
Well, one thing I know about you from hanging out and stuff is you work your ass off. I mean, anything you have, you deserve, apart from your playing. What people don't seem to understand is when we met at the airport in Italy, you had, I don't know, it must have been like 500 pounds worth of stuff with you, man. I was like, that guy showed up in a little car. we were playing the Umbrian Blues Festival, and we had the guy who picking us up from my hotel, and then we swung by the airport to get Josh. And he had a little car, and Josh walks out, and we're like, oh boy. Like, I can't believe we actually fit all that stuff in that car. I was sitting in the back seat like this, hoping your shit didn't fall on me. But my point is, you were carrying, so you had CDs, you had records, all the merch, right? You had the 2 guitars in that case and your suitcase. And then you're flying into Rome, and then a few days later, you went out to Northern Europe. You went up, right? To like Norway or Sweden or something.
Maybe it was Scandinavia.
Yeah, Scandinavia, yeah. And so,
yeah, I mean, these are the little things we're talking about. What do I wish I could get to?
Yeah.
Maybe not having to do everything myself all the time for the rest of my life, you know? Because, I'm used to carrying my guitar, my pedal board, my suitcase full of merch, you know, and that's one of the things about social media and the ever-expanding reach that we have. Yeah. It's great. Don't get me wrong. Like, the fact that people care at all what I do is the greatest feeling. But it also sometimes creates this narrative that maybe I'm more successful than I really am. And I can't necessarily live up to it. So I'll get places sometimes, and people will ask me, I mean, quite honestly, every gig, it's like, why was this ticket only $8? You know, I saw Joe Bonamassa and it cost $200. I'd be willing to pay that for you, you know, and why are you the one selling your merch right after the gig off the front of the stage, drenched in sweat, you know, and well, because no one else is going to do it for me, you know, and right. So I think that's the next goal too, is to start to present myself in the way that now kind of some people think maybe I am in this level that I'm not. So you gotta, in this business, you gotta fake it till you make it. I need to start presenting myself on a higher level than I'm at to make that level become a reality. But that's really difficult to do.
It is really difficult. I don't think they quite understand that. And people ask me like, hey, you know, you geeking a lot? And I'm like, it's really hard. You know, oh, you should come to Europe. You should come to England again or something. I'm like, yeah, if I could work it out in a way that would make sense, that I could actually do it, then I would be happy to do it, you know. But yeah, I'm not complaining. Same as you. You're not really complaining because I play guitar for a living. So I'm really, really fortunate, and we've both figured out how to do this with fingers, and each pie's all over the place. Whether it's teaching, which we both really enjoy doing, and then putting out recordings. You got your studio, and so you just put it together in some way that works for you. So yeah, is it what we imagined? When you're looking at the cover of Guitar Player, when you're younger, or you see whoever was those people who inspired you, and then you go, oh, it's really. And then when you become friends with some of the people who you idolized, and then you realize even they're having a hard time, you're like, wow, this is crazy. Right?
Yeah, I mean, it is crazy. And like you just said, is it what I imagined when I was the kid, where I'd be? Am I where I thought I would be? No. But I also have gotten into a million things that I never would have even cared about back then.
Yeah.
So, it's a reevaluation of goals all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm changing the things that are important to me and adding new things that are important to me. And then, yes, letting some go because they may never happen.
Yeah. Or, like the rock star stuff was when people who were rock stars and they're asking you, hey, man, how you doing? How you making a living? And you're like, wait, what? Because you didn't. Yeah. Or, they're playing the county fair. And that's not what they had intended upon either. So it's an interesting business. So I think one of the differences I think that we're talking to is like you're a musician, and musicians, if you're really good and working, usually find a way. If you're a smart enough, motivated person, and I don't expect anything to happen without me working for it. It just doesn't happen that way. So that's my point. Is that you're really working super hard with this, and
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the only way I can, like you said, it's the only way I can even feel confident that I'm all right, that everything is cool, that I can take a breath, is if I'm working as hard as I can. Because otherwise, shit just falls through the cracks, and you start to, you end up back at square one. There's no break for me. I have to be thinking about it all the time, pushing it, especially the more and more I focus on only, I haven't gone on the road as a sideman now in more than 5 years, probably 6 years, and that was a conscious decision. Now, I probably made more of a living when I was working as a sideman than I do now.
Yeah.
So it's for me to enable that to continue, I have to be pushing as hard as I possibly can to try to approach the living I used to be able to make as a sideman and those types of things. So.
Well, just to thank everybody here. I mean, we really appreciate everybody, like that's one thing that I always try to make super clear. And I know you are the same way, that people who buy your stuff or buy your record and they understand and follow you. And there's this thing of like, how many people do you really need? Jason Laughlin, who will be on the show next week again, we're talking about this. You only really need for us to do what we want to do successfully and have a living is if there's like a core group of people who follow what we do. And then if they buy, there's like 1,000 people, if they buy everything you do, you can actually have a decent living. You know what I mean? So
absolutely. And I'm so grateful for those people. When I put something out, I can count on, okay, this group of people will definitely pick this up.
Yeah.
So where you get frustrated is how do you expand out of that group?
Of course.
Because you look at the numbers, and it's like, okay, I got this many people who are my fans and follow me. Like, if I could sell each one of them one thing, get them $10, one record a year, change my life, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't sound too extreme, but it obviously is.
It's very difficult.
It's the difference between 50,000 records and 5,000 records,
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, RJ Ronquillo is here. If I pronounce RJ, if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, please, I apologize. I'd like to have you on the show. What do you think, RJ? Let's do it, right? That'd be a ton of fun. All right, I'll text you later. All right, this is from Lisa Halbert and Jim Halbert. A big fan of both you guys. How do you approach your broad outlook on the fretboard? Are you seeing chords and scales in every note?
Yeah, I am seeing not necessarily scales, but I'm seeing chords. Absolutely. So the way that I'm trying to think when I'm improvising is like I had two sides of my brain at one point. I was thinking of all the things I could play over every chord and in every moment. So that was a lot of the knowledge that I needed to know was, okay, this chord, I like to play these scales or these things or these ideas, or at least know what are the intervals in this chord. Let me hit the chord tones in this chord. I tried over the last 20 years to shut that side of my brain off and trust in the fact that I'm comfortable enough with all the work that I've put in that stuff takes care of itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just autopilot, so that then I was able to free my mind up to think only about connecting the dots the way I was talking about earlier, building bridges. So I spend all my thought thinking, what's the next chord in the song? And how do I get from wherever I am right now naturally to the next thing that's going to happen? So I'm always kind of trying to think steps ahead of, where we're going. What's the next chord? And that comes from, yes, being comfortable in the fretboard. So like I said earlier, knowing wherever I am at the moment where I'm improvising, that I can make a pivot, So if I'm playing B.B. King and I want to play a 2/5, that I can go by playing that E minor and this B, A to get me to D, you know what I mean? And I can go back the same way by playing B minor, E, and A here. So I can never leave B.B. King and still make changes and do interesting things. Yep. And that comes from that comfort on the fretboard, from running those scales and knowing my chords everywhere they are. And I mean, don't overlook just the importance of knowing the pentatonic scale in all 5 positions in every key. I still don't think there's anything that unlocks the fretboard for guitar players like that, because that's the thing that lets you always know, where's the D? Here's the D. Here's the D. Here. Nothing taught me the fretboard like that, and it's the thing we use the most.
Yeah. Well, my answer to that is basically what you said. Yeah, knowing the changes, just seeing whatever the stuff is, knowing. I don't think about scales that much. I think primarily the chord that I'm on, and then the notes that are around it. It sounds. That's through practice. I would never say, I think about the chromatic scale. I remember this one teacher years ago that was like, I use the chromatic scale exclusively. And you're like, well, come on, dude. Like, you can't, not really. Yes, you're thinking you can use every note, but you're thinking about the chord tones. So for me, the same thing. I look at isolate the position, like I said, with the BB stuff, to the smallest position you can find all those changes in there, and then take it from there. But yeah, I'm seeing chords, because scales to me just.
I see like flashcards in my head.
Yeah.
But what's screaming at me is what's next.
Yes.
It's telling me where to go, and then I'm making an editorial choice on how to get there.
Right.
Basically. So if I'm going from that A to that D, I'm either going to go. I may just play blues and land on the D, or land on the major, or whatever, or I may create a bridge. I may go by playing a 2/5/1, or I may play a diminished, or I may play completely chromatic, and I'm going to just make those choices on the fly. But that enables me to do that by thinking, where am I going, and letting the autopilot take care of the rest. I know at least one thing to play on every chord, no matter what. It may be an arpeggio, it may be a scale, it may be, this is a major 7, I'm just going to play the major 7, I can't think of anything else at the moment. But I know at least one thing to play on every chord. So if I let that take care of itself, it frees me up to think about the connections and where am I going? Right. How do I let that connect?
Yeah. Well, I think I don't want to. I think I got to close it down right now in a little bit. But thanks for being here. We think we've got a lot of questions, but we've covered most of the stuff. Is there anything you want to just talk about before you go? Just a general idea. First of all, thank you so much for being here, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks for asking, man. Anytime. I think people. If I can impart anything to anybody, put into this what you wish to get out. That's what's most important. It's like, again, we all have somewhere we're trying to go, and if you're hearing things and you can't get there, the only one holding yourself back is you. It's like, just put in there's no substitute for time. If you put in the time, you're gonna get where you want to go. That's kind of the only way. And as long as you're enjoying it and having fun, then you'll continue to move forward. So practice the things you're excited about. Practice things that make you happy. But also try to practice with like some intent. Have somewhere you're trying to go.
Yeah.
If you balance your practice that way, you'll never stop. You won't think of it as I don't think of it as practice. This is my lifelong journey.
Mm-hmm.
Will never end. It's just I'm going to get better every day, and it's the greatest thing ever. It's a gift that never stops giving to me. I'd be lost without it.
Yeah. Well, that's a great way to close, and I feel exactly the same way as you do. It just think about just finding the instrument, what an effect it's had on your life. Every level. I mean, I'm not even talking about career. I'm just talking about this thing that you have that you can continuously work on till the day you die, and just wanting to get better for no other reason, just for the pure joy of the journey of the whole thing.
I would not have anything in my life without this. I wouldn't have met my wife if I was a musician. I met her at a gig.
Yeah, me too.
I wouldn't have my family. When I'm down, which I'm down a lot right now, this is what brings me out of it instantly. Nothing fear than picking this thing up, and I'm grateful for that. This thing is it's the best.
It's the best thing ever. And the greatest thing is, like, if you can put aside, as we were talking about earlier, and I talked about it in previous things, these ideas of what it should be and what it should be, and just enjoy what you're doing at that moment, and creating, the act of creating something in the moment is just the greatest thing in the world. Whether it's for yourself or for people, it doesn't really matter. It's just the act of just creation. That's my favorite part about the whole thing. Well, I really appreciate you being here, man. So everybody, check out Josh's website, Josh Smith Guitar. Pick up his new Live at the Baked Potato, which is really awesome. And if you go on the site, you can get his TrueFire courses there too. And as I said all along, if you buy them through Josh's site, he actually gets more money for it. Because, yes.
Right.
And TrueFire is totally great. We've talked about this, one of the most awesome people in the world. But just to let you know, you buy it through our site, we get a higher cut. And they're all for that. So they're really great about that. And do you have anything coming up new? I saw something with TrueFire is coming out again with you. They're like transcribing your live thing or something like that?
Yeah, they took one of my live broadcasts from when I was there.
Cool.
And I guess they were getting questions about it. And I was starting to get some questions about some of the things I played in there. So they just went ahead and transcribed it and made like this live plus. It comes with a few of the lessons from the package.
Awesome.
And then the live conversation transcribed. And so they came out with that. And the next week we have the Blue Camp or whatever.
Yeah. Okay, so go to TrueFire's website. I did a rhythm camp this week with Andy Timmons and Corey Congilio. And did really, really well. So next week, you just go to TrueFire's website. It's right on the homepage. You can sign up for the lead course. It's with you, Matt, and who else? I can't remember.
Kid Anderson. Me, Matt, and Kid Anderson.
Nobody good on that. I'm going to sign up for it because all you guys are just the best. So it's going to be a ton of fun. So you go sign up that. You have to sign up for it at TrueFire. So you got to sign up ahead of time, and you can watch it. I think on YouTube streaming. So definitely do that. Yep. Well, next week, I'm going to be here on Wednesday, as always, with the live lockdown. And then next weekend's going to be Josh Smith. No, you're Josh Smith. I'm sorry, man. I drank too much coffee. I don't know about you. There's so much stuff going on, right? Like,
so much.
And I am so grateful to be really busy at this point, but to the point of, like, how many, like, people or things do you have to get done in the next week?
Dude, I got to film some stuff for TrueFire. We're mixing a record that I'm producing right now. So we're actually braving being in the same room together, lately and working. I'm in the middle of pre-production for the Eric Gales record that I'm producing with Joe. He was just here all last week. We were writing together.
All right, wait, hold on. Okay, let's just talk about that before we sign off. Let's just talk about that for 1 minute. I'm sure people want to hear a little bit about that. And you produce Andy Timmons' record too, right?
So we're finishing that too. So I've been producing a lot. But yeah, coming up in a few months, we're going to record Eric Gale's next album, which is going to be produced by myself and Joe Bonamassa together. So Eric was here last week and we were writing. and just doing the pre-production hang, getting the lane, the idea of the record kind of preconceived, and writing tunes and picking tunes, things like that. So I'm excited about that because I've been an Eric fan since I was a kid, and we've been friends for 20 years, and selfishly, I have a record I've always wanted him to make. So things out of him, But yeah, the producing thing is great. Andy Timmons, that was back in January, so just before the pandemic, and Andy came out here. He wanted to do something a little more bluesy than his previous projects, a little more organic. So, it was my guys, tracked totally live. And Andy just crushing, absolute crushing, and some great tunes. I'm excited for that. We're going to start mixing that pretty soon. Even Greg Koch was here right before the pandemic, recorded a few songs.
Oh, cool.
I'm not producing his record. I would say I'm executively producing it from a little bit, just adding my insight and recording here at the studio. So he was supposed to come back in March and cancel that, of course. So he'll be coming back here at some point to finish his record. I'm in the middle of Artur Menezes' record, great young blues guitar player from Brazil who lives here in LA.
Okay.
There's a lot of that, a lot of producing going on.
That's awesome.
I like it a lot.
That's great. Okay, well, thanks, man. Thanks for getting that last stuff. That's really super cool. Thanks for being here once again. Appreciate it. And thanks to Phil Mingan for doing the great moderating as always. And hey, you guys like the new logo? I got a logo going on. Where is it? There. I can't even tell anymore. I'm looking at the camera. So I'll see you guys on Wednesday. And then next Saturday is Jason Laughlin. And the following Saturday is Brett Papa is going to come on. So that's going to be a lot of fun as well. So thanks for everybody being here. And we will see you later. Thanks. Okay, we're done.